Mackie.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. That member is a minister in the government, but his mouth so often works for the opposition. Now, I want to actually talk about something that matters. I want to talk about jobs. Because we're being told that we have a rock-star economy. We have a rock-star economy. And as David Parker pointed out, it's lucky we're having an early election because all the indicators are it's downhill from here. So who has benefited in this rock-star economy that we're seeing so far? Because I think the questions New Zealanders are going to be asking themselves is, do I feel better off? And have I got my fair share of this rock-star economy recovery? And overwhelmingly, the answer is no. Yes, there have been some people who've done very, very well out of this current government, but for the average Kiwi family, they are struggling to stand still, and too many are going backwards. That's the reality of a so-called recovery under the national government, and it's only going to go downhill from here. And I think if we put Christchurch aside, because we all accept that Christchurch is a special case, I sometimes feel as though this government thinks that New Zealand ends at the Bombay Hills, that it ends at the Bombay Hills and the rest of us really don't matter. And it's been a long time since I've heard the words regional economic development come out the mouth of a National Party minister. And I'm not surprised that it's election year that it took for regional economic development to suddenly be paid lip service to by this national government. Because when we were in government, we had a minister of regional development. We prioritised it. Mr Speaker, as you will know, much of the wealth in this country comes from the provinces of New Zealand. If they are in trouble, we are in trouble. And we recognise that 9 years of a national government in the 1990s had put our regional economies and regional communities at risk, and so we did something about it. We invested in rural and provincial economies. Regional economies, Mrs Tolley. Well, she wouldn't know anything about that. If Mrs Tolley thinks that things are going great on the East Coast and in the Eastern Bay of Plenty, then I suspect that shows how arrogant and out of touch she is. Now, what we've had in Gisborne, because in Gisborne we used to have a rail line. There was a washout in that rail line, and instead, when you put this in the context of the billions and billions of dollars being spent on roads of national significance around Auckland, all we asked for was less than $4 million to fix the rail line from Gisborne to Napier. Everyone wanted it, Mr Speaker, everyone except Mrs Tolley. Everyone wanted that rail line reopened, and the national government said no. They said to the Gisborne community, no, we don't care that you are the most isolated district in the country. We don't care that you've had enormous success at getting traffic back on that rail line. We say, no, we won't fix it, but here you go, have some more $14 billion more for roads of national significance up around Auckland. And in the Labour Party, we think that's not fair. We think regional New Zealand deserves the same kind of attention that Auckland gets, and it is important that Auckland gets attention. It's our only international city, absolutely support that, but the rest of us matter as well. And so in lieu for our rail line, they said instead of a rail line you can have an economic development potential report. So we got this report. It cost $200,000 to tell us what we already knew. $200,000 to tell us what we already knew. That $200,000 would have been given to our council to actually do some good with in terms of economic development, instead of having the government tell us that, and this was great, the East Coast suffers from a perception of deprivation. No, we don't. We suffer from deprivation. That's the whole point. It's not a perception. It's a reality, and this government is doing nothing about it. Inequality is getting worse. The gap between the haves and the have-nots is widening, and unfortunately, we have far too many have-nots on the East Coast and in the Eastern Bay of Plenty. So basically, we knew what the report would say. What the report would say is, if you don't want jobs in the oil and gas industry, stop whinging about being unemployed. That's essentially what it said. And look, any jobs that come from that industry would be very welcome on the East Coast, provided the environmental protections are there. And I think the Parliamentary Commissioner for the Environment's recent report showed that there are big gaps in that. But the chances of us finding something commercial are very small. And we in the provinces, you know what, we think we deserve a plan B. We deserve a plan B in case that plan A, which is the only plan the government has, doesn't come to fruition, and it's more likely that it won't then it will. So where's the plan B for the provinces? Where's the plan for those communities that make up the backbone of this country? It is not there. A Labour government will play an active role in regional economic development. We funded forestry roading in Gisborne last time when we were in government. That's the kind of thing we would look to do again. We would work with the provinces rather than working against them as this government does every day.
Honourable Tony Ryall.
Well, Mr Speaker, it's a difficult day for Mr Cunliffe when the C team is being rolled out in the general debate.